The question is, do you agree that Scotland should be an independent country?
For me, the principle that we work best when we work together.
Well, they didn't.
Very serious. The referendum. It seems to me that they're not dealing with the issues.
Hello and welcome to Scottish Independence Podcast, episode number 29. In this episode I spoke with Ivan McKee. Ivan's a businessman who's got concerns in a number of countries, but mostly Scotland I think, and he's also a member of the group Business for Scotland. The conversation was extremely interesting, and I think you'll be quite surprised by some of the groups that they would be ideologically in tune with. I think that will give you a bit of surprise. So we'll go straight to the conversation and I'll have a little word with you at the end. Hello Ivan, how's it going?
I'm very good, Michael. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad at all. So you're a member of Business for Scotland. I suppose we should start, if you could just tell us a little about the organisation, how it got started and what are your goals and aims.
Sure, yeah. Business for Scotland was really kicked off by Gordon McIntyre Kemp, or rather restarted. The original vehicle was something that Jim Mather used way back in the last devolution referendum to convince the business community to vote yes. Gordon kind of brought it back to life with Jim's support last year as a vehicle for indicating the support and organising the support within the business community that exists for a yes vote in the independence referendum. I kind of got involved in it a few months back, and I've been spending quite a bit of time working with the group, developing the organisation and trying to get the message out there.
And what sort of reaction have you been getting amongst the business community? Because it's not necessarily the same thing as canvassing on the streets that a lot of our other guests have done.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the support has been very, very encouraging. I think there's a perception that the business community's got an inbuilt reaction against independence, but I don't think that's the case at all. I think that's been falsely portrayed. We've had, hundreds of members now signing up. I think we publicised the fact that we were over 500 a few weeks back, and we've been adding to it considerably since then. We've had now 50 people through our ambassador training, and we've got another session lined up later this month. We're planning to run one of those every month. And we've had dozens and dozens of articles published on our website, and lots of people coming forward to let us publish their individual profiles of who they are and why they support independence from a business perspective. So the response has been very, very encouraging, I must say.
So how are you doing it? Are you doing this? The website's very professional looking as well, but are you doing this with, are you having conferences and meetings around? Is it open for anyone to go? Absolutely.
We encourage anyone to read what we've got to say on the website, and we organise events. We've had 3 public events, if you like, so far in Glasgow and Edinburgh, and we've had between 50 and 60 people along to each of those, where we've done a presentation on the economics of independence, the business case for independence, and then an open session for any questions or discussion. That's been a mixture of people who are committed to the yes vote, and I must say quite a fair number of undecided people who have had a very favourable response from once we've stressed the benefits of independence to the business community.
And just before we get to what you think the benefits for the business community would be if we had independence, can I just ask, in the group itself, is it mostly small businesses, medium-sized, or is there large businesses in there as well, or is it a mix of all three?
There is a mix, but to be fair, obviously most business people, if you like, within Scotland are in the kind of micro business sector. So there's probably the majority from small businesses, and then quite a lot, I would say, from kind of small to medium-sized businesses. The organisation is open to individual members as such, rather than that's what we tend to focus on, rather than companies, if you like, joining as companies. So we try to involve business people as individuals, if you like, and say the vast majority would be small businesses.
Okay, so here comes the big question, the big broad question. What is the business case for independence? How could things be better?
Okay, so I think the first thing to talk about is on the economics of it. And anybody that's looked at that in any detail at all will fully understand that Scotland more than pays its way within the UK, and Scotland as an independent country, based on all the numbers going back for the last 30 years, would be considerably better off than it is as part of the UK at the moment. We generate 9.9% of UK taxes and only incur 9.3% of UK spending in the last year available. For the figures 2011-12, that said it would be about £4.5 billion better off as a country if independent. So that's money you can use either to invest or spend or to pay down some of the debt. But it puts us in a very, very strong financial position compared to the rest of the UK. Interestingly, when you take oil out of that picture, the GDP for Scotland per head is about the same as the UK average, even if you completely exclude oil. If you include oil, which obviously you would do as it's part of Scotland's economy, Scottish GDP is about 18% higher than the UK average. So we've got a very strong economy. There's still some remnants of the "we're too poor to go it alone" mantra kicking about. But I think more and more people over time are realising that that's absolutely not the case. So as a business person, being in that environment where you've got a strong economy that's able to invest and move forward, then clearly that offers tremendous benefits. And most of the micro businesses obviously are very much dependent on the general state of the economy to generate business. If you then think about from a business point of view, from a conceptual point of view, it's really about business is all about risk and opportunity, and business people understand that. And you look at any business venture, you would sit down and say, right, what's the best that can happen? What's the worst that can happen? What's the probability of all of these different scenarios? And that's something that, I mean, as somebody who invests in businesses, buys businesses, invests in ventures, runs businesses, I understand that. And when you sit down and look at it from that point of view, you realise that it really is, as a business, it's a tremendous opportunity for Scotland to run its own affairs.
But doesn't William Hague threatening to stop promoting whisky in British embassies completely undermine all of that?
Well, the fact is that if you want to get the British Embassy to promote whisky, you need to pay them for the privilege. So, and I'm sure they would still take our money from us even if we were independent. So it's a bit of a nonsense.
Yeah, well, that was just a little joke.
That's okay. It was a warm-up question.
Yeah, that was a silly question just to get to the point, which is what legislation, what's the problem with waiting for legislation from Westminster or relying on Westminster regulation and promotion for Scottish businesses? What problems does that create for Scottish business and industry?
Well, if you look at the UK's economy, obviously the biggest, I mean, if the biggest part of Scotland's economy is oil at 15% of the economy, the biggest part of the UK's economy is financial services, which is not far behind at 10%. So what happens within the UK context is people sitting in London make decisions in London, next to the City of London. A, that's the biggest revenue generator for the UK economy as a whole, and B, that's the people that are sitting close to Cheek and Jill within the centre of London.
So this is Boris Johnson's £1 spent in Croydon's much better for the UK as a whole than £1 spent in Strathclyde?
Well, I mean, I think that's a nonsense thing for him to say anyway. But in terms of the concept behind that, or the philosophy behind it, yeah, then that's absolutely right. So the decision making is heavily influenced by that, and therefore it's all about what's good for the City of London, which generates the biggest tax take in the UK, and that is generally what do you need to do to support the banks, what do you need to do for short-term returns in the market, what do you need to do for keep the city investors happy. Those strategies in that direction clearly isn't the same as what you would want to do if you wanted a longer-term industrialisation strategy that's looking to the future, understanding key industries, understanding how you structure your support to get companies involved in the supply chain for those industries, be it manufacturing or service or whatever. So it's quite a different focus and quite a different direction of resources.
You mentioned an interesting word there, reindustrialisation. Now, I'm someone that's probably a bit to the left of yourself, and I'm quite interested in green issues as well. Just as a general question, do you not think a lot of countries around the world are missing a huge opportunity in a green reindustrialisation? Do you think that would be something that could be done in Scotland, particularly with all the potential for renewable power and stuff?
Absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, I do business all over the world, and at the moment I've got businesses in England, Scotland, and Eastern Europe, manufacturing businesses. So I fully understand how the dynamics of cost competitive works in that environment. And the reality is, you're not going to be able to set up a factory in Scotland or anywhere in the West that's going to go head to head with the Chinese or Eastern Europe building mass-produced products. That's not the reality of the way the world economy is. What you can do, and what you can do very successfully, is identify high-tech sectors where you've got an inbuilt advantage, where you can build clusters of manufacturing around that with the proper government direction and support within the European rules. And all of that can be done. And green, I think, is a tremendous example of that. In the wider sense, you're really looking at energy as a concept. You're looking at the work we've done in terms of, or Scotland's done in terms of the oil industry, how you leverage on manufacturing on the back of that. But then how you go beyond that, as you say, into be it wind and then tidal, which have got tremendous potential for the future. A lot of the innovation on that is, and more should be happening in Scotland, and then manufacturing would sit on the back of that. And the great thing about those things also is that A, it's innovative, B, it's new technology, so it requires a lot of academic support, etc., which we can do in Scotland. But it's also large, and if you're building mobile phones, it's easy to ship them around the world. But if you're building wind turbines or as we go forward, tidal power generators, etc., it's very difficult to ship those around the world. So if you're close to the source of where the energy is generated, it's much easier to have a credible manufacturing strategy for that.
So there's a real opportunity for that in Scotland, do you think? And what
absolutely, without a doubt, yeah.
And what other areas do you think Scotland would have a competitive advantage as an independent country that it's not really able to get into now?
Yeah, I think that's critical. I think food and drink, built on the whisky industry, but also other premium food brands, is something that's there and should be capitalised on. The oil industry I've mentioned. I think that when the decisions on oil industry are made in Edinburgh from a legislative point of view, an investment point of view, rather than in London, then you'll find that a lot of the decision makers within those oil companies obviously would relocate to the centre of decision making, which is going to be Edinburgh, which gives us further scope for understanding how we can have an industrial strategy that supports the oil industry more. And really then you're getting down to looking at, well, what sectors have we got, what indigenous companies have we got that are world beaters at the moment, and how do we structure supply chains and clusters round about supporting them? We've got skills in metal manufacturing, sheet metal machining, etc. in Scotland still, which are areas that we can build on. And marine's another area where I think that, and there's a lot of talk about investment from the MOD, etc. going forward. But if you look at another way around and say, well, Scotland's got that marine historically in terms of understanding those technologies. If you look at the blueprint for the Scottish Defence Force, that's going to be much more focused on marine because of the geography of where we are and who we are, and the oil sector support, etc. Then there's potential for shipbuilding, business generation there as well. So there's quite a number of sectors, and that's just off the top of my head. If you go through it in a more structured fashion, there's going to be quite a lot more where you would sit there and say, those are sectors where we can certainly focus our resources on going forward.
Yeah, very interesting. And would your organisation support the creation of an oil fund? It's an often talked about theme, and it doesn't seem to have done any harm to Norway that they did it. But some people say, well, we should have started it 40 years ago, but now it's too late. What do you think about the idea of an oil fund for Scotland?
Yeah, I mean, the oil funds, there's a number of ways to look at that. The concept is, as I mentioned earlier, Scotland would have more, significantly more revenue coming in to its coffers as an independent country than it's currently allocated from the UK budgets. So then you've got a decision what you want to do with that. We could look at investment in infrastructure, which is badly needed and generates a lot of industrialisation as a spin-off from that, a lot of job generation as a spin-off from that. You could look to pay down some of the debt that we will inherit from the UK, or you could look at an oil fund. Now, Ken, it's a bit counterintuitive to say, well, why would you invest in an oil fund when you're currently borrowing as well? But the reality is that borrowing costs at the moment are probably about 2% or so. The last numbers I saw in the Norwegian oil fund, they were generating a double-digit return because of the way they were investing that. So it's quite possible, if you think of your household finances, you could be in a position where you've got a savings account and you've got a mortgage, because that's the way you choose to manage your finances and it makes sense. So there's no reason not to do that. I think that the answer is on day one you set up an oil fund, there's no doubt about that. How much you put into each year is a decision you would take on an annual basis based on the financial situation on any given year.
And what you're describing there seems like a recipe for